And I've done a lot of work with the Aramaic language. Aramaic is the language of Jesus. It's also one of the three original languages of the Bible, along with Hebrew and Greek. So, if you do research into Aramaic, what you're going to discover is that the word for God in Aramaic is Allah, or Allah. In modern Aramaic, they call God Allah. Now, this seems to be related to the Hebrew word Elohim. And you have this word El, which is a Semitic word which just means a generic deity. So it seems that the word Allah is not an Arabic word. It's an Aramaic word which made its way into the Arabic language, but it's based on a primitive Semitic root which merely means God. From Hebrew Elohim, Aramaic Allah, and then you get Arabic Allah. Now, Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic are all Semitic languages, and they're closely related. And for those who don't understand the concept of language families, it's like a Romance language. Spanish and Italian are closely related because they both evolved out of Latin. And so these Semitic languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, evolved from a Proto-Semitic language. So when Jesus is on the cross, his words are recorded in the Gospel of Mark. In Aramaic, he says, Elohi, Elohi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Like you say, Allah would be your God. The fact of the matter is, certain Christians who are engaged in criticism of Islam, sometimes they will say that Allah is an idolatrous God and a false God. Now let me say, I'm going to disagree with this, but let me first say that I am not a Muslim. However, you go to the book of Daniel, if you don't believe that Allah means God, the fact of the matter is, the Bible in the Aramaic sections in Ezra and in the book of Daniel calls God Allah. And if you don't believe me, you go to Strong's Concordance, you look up the word God in the book of Daniel in the Aramaic sections, chapter 2 to 7, and you look it up in the lexicon in the back, and you will find that, I think Strong's writes it is E-L-A-W, Allah. What's the difference? It just means God. So, just grammatically speaking, Allah means God. And the next fact of the matter is there are, as of now, millions of Arabic-speaking Christians in Egypt, and in their languages and in Arabic versions of the Holy Bible, God is called Allah. So this is a word that not just Muslims use for God, it's a word that Christians use for God. And if you go on the island of Malta, now the island of Malta is mentioned in the Bible, it's where Paul had his shipwreck and he washed ashore. And a snake bit him in the hand while he was drying himself off at a fire, and he threw the snake into the fire, and he was unharmed, and the people believed it's a miracle, and they believed in the Messiah from the preaching of Paul. But today, Malta is a Christian nation, and they speak a form of Arabic. And if you get a Maltese Bible, even though they speak a form of Arabic, they use the Latin alphabet because it's a Catholic country. And they call God Allah. So, the next question is, okay, what are we going to do with that? I believe that the word Allah clearly just means God. Now, I will say that the Allah of the Quran, you could argue and say that the Allah of the Quran is not the same as the God of the Bible, in that the conception of who God is in Islam, his nature, and the conception of who God is in Christianity is radically different. For instance, Islam teaches that Allah had no son. They do not call God Father, and the idea of the fatherhood of God as taught in the New Testament and the Gospels is an idea which is foreign to Islam. So you could say that the Islam conception of God is different from the Christian conception of God, and I would agree. But saying that the problem is that they call their God Allah and Allah is a false God, I think that their conception of God, you could argue and say it's false. But the word is a word that's used in the Bible and by Arabic-speaking Christians. Now, the next issue is I've seen certain publications where they say that Muslims worship the moon god. I do not believe that's true. If you look and just do a search on the internet about the crescent moon, some Muslims do not believe that that is a symbol that should be used for Islam, and apparently it began being used as a Muslim symbol by the Turks, and it could have been a pagan symbol they used that became Islamified when they converted to Islam. Some people argue that the crescent moon was a symbol of the city of Constantinople, and that Muslims used the symbol of the crescent moon as a sign that they conquered the Christian city of Byzantium or Constantinople. But that's open to debate. But what bothers me is that certain Christians will say that Allah was an idol. Now, there probably was an idol to Allah in the Kaaba. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, because they had idols to many gods. But what people generally use is there's a picture of a god from Hazor, which is actually north of the Sea of Galilee, I believe. It's a city that was conquered by Joshua, according to the book of Joshua. And there's this god, a seated god, and he's got the crescent moon on his chest. And so they're saying, hey, look, here's a picture of this idol, a Semitic idol, a god with a crescent moon on him. But we need to disassociate the moon symbol of Islam and the Islamic religion or Allah, because there's no real clear relationship. And it is true that in ancient times that the ancients worshipped the moon. And the Arabic people worshiped the moon, but they also worshipped other gods such as the sun and El. The god is called El in the Bible, and among the Canaanites, El was a pagan god, and they found idols of El. So, it kind of puts Christians in the same position. If you say, we found a statue of Allah, and therefore Islam is an idolatrous worshiping religion, that's one of the problems that Islam doesn't have. And I haven't seen any proof that Allah is a moon god. All Allah is a generic word for God, like our word God. You talk about a God, the God, and we also use it for the Supreme Being. Technically, according to the Scriptures, the name of God is Yahweh or Jehovah, but we have the word God, which we use to refer to deity. And in the Arabic language, that word is Allah, which they got from the Aramaic language. And besides that, in ancient Egypt, their moon god was called Yah. There doesn't seem to be any relation between Yahweh or Jehovah and the Egyptian moon god Yah, but you could argue there was. You see what these people have done is they took a statue without any inscription. We don't know. We know it's an idol of a god, but it's hard to say what god that is. But because it has a moon on its chest, they're saying, well, this is Allah. We need to have sound scholarship. This is not the way to argue with Islam. You need to have substantive arguments. And quibbling about Allah and making the word Allah and making false associations with idolatry isn't helpful. But saying that this word refers to a pagan god when it doesn't, and when it's used in the Bible to refer to the one true God, and the word that Yeshua, the Messiah, or Jesus used for God was Allah, or Allah. How can you attack the word when it's used, the word Allah, when it's used in the Bible, when it was used by Daniel, by Ezra, and also by Jesus or Yeshua the Messiah. So, if you want to engage in polemics or interfaith discussion or debate with Islam, I don't think it's helpful to quibble over the name Allah, because it's a name used for God in the Bible. The problem with Islam, if you want to look at that from a Christian point of view, is theological. They deny that Jesus died on the cross. Most of what we have written in the Gospels would be rejected by Islam. So there are issues we have disagreements about, and we should be honest with that. And I don't think that arguing about the name Allah is helpful. So, like I said, if you don't believe me, get your Strong's Concordance and look it up yourself. And go visit some, there's Coptic Christian churches all over the place now. They have a large immigrant community over here, so you can actually meet with Arabic Christians and talk to them. And you'll see that the problem with Islam isn't that they call God Allah. I challenge you to do that. Become informed and educated. And if you want to put some ideas out in public, just make sure you have an informed opinion and not a misinformed opinion. So thank you for your time and consideration.